This is Suit Up Sports.
Suit Up Sports.
Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout along with 10-year NFL vet Frank Garcia. And now on our guest line, I say guest line. I don't even know if it's a line anymore. That's radio
we
talk
have a guest
there.
Line now. Awesome.
Yeah, it's just a guest joining us visually is Brett Hoffman with Sleeper NFL and Gator Wages. Brett, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on. And let's talk draft. I've been dialed in. The Panthers picks, all picks. Let's get after it.
Well, let's start right there because Panthers picking at 8. There's so many mock drafts and rumors out there. And, Frank and I have dove into this thing, for the last month or two. And we both have kind of gotten on to the Tyler Warren. If he's there at 8, we both think that it'd be really hard to pass him over as opposed to taking a shot at one of these defensive ends that early that you're not sure about. And especially with the depth they have at defensive end, you might be able to find one later in the second or third round. But the one thing that everyone are really mocking with the Panthers now, you see Ted McMillan in a lot of these mock drafts. And if you really want to get one of those top 6 or 7 receivers in a weak receiver draft, you almost have to take them in the first round, it appears, if you want one of those top 6 or 7 pass catchers. I know, Frank.
Yeah, but before we get into Tyler, when you answer that question, I want to give you the rationale that I have, anyways, behind why I feel that way. Because the Panthers are going to draft a lot for need potentially. There's going to be a lot of things they have, but they've addressed a lot of the issues that in the offseason with free agency. So it's freed them up a little bit more to have an opportunity to take best player available. And with best player available, I believe that when you look at a guy like that, anywhere he's on the field, he's going to make a difference. Whether he's in the backfield, running the ball, blocking, as an H-back, as a tight end, you can create mismatches very similar to a Christian McCaffrey type of player in a different position, using size and speed more than just the quickness and things that McCaffrey's going to be able to do. But as an offensive player and an offensive-minded guy, I look at a piece like that and I said, he's going to change and make a bigger difference than any other player at the draft because he's a potential mismatch anywhere on the field. So that's why I feel like you could take him, that early.
I mean, listen, you guys are nailing it ahead on nailing it. I mean, look, I'm going to be so real with you. The Jets are picking right before you. Yeah. The odds makers, I'm looking at the betting odds, who they're going to pick, favorite position. Tyler Warren is the consensus pick at 7. I'm in the New York community. I see Jets fans. I speak to Jets fans all day. They're all in on Tyler Warren too. So the question for me with the Panthers and Tyler Warren isn't about, the right call, because I think I agree completely with you guys in terms of difference maker. I think he's going to be the offensive rookie of the year. Like that's,
right.
That's where I see his immediate value. And I think we quickly talked about him last show, but if he is there at 8, I think I'm with you guys, best player available. And also, like you said, you addressed the, other needs throughout the offseason. And you're in position to take best player available, and you got to give Bryce some weapons. Talk about weapons. This guy's a multiverse weapon, and it's an auto pick for me.
Yeah, and like I mentioned with the pass catchers, they're pretty much the consensus is there's 6 to 7 guys in this draft that will go in the first or second round that have a chance to be good. There's not anyone that they think is going to be, a Jefferson or a Chase. They got some guys that they think could be. I know that my favorite receiver on the board, not counting tight ends, is Golden from Texas. I like his speed. Watching Texas play, he just seems to make the tough catches. He's a tough kid. He's fast. I know a lot of the Panther fans down here are all over Ted McMillan. That's the guy they love. 6'4", ran a 4.5 or a 4.45 or something like that. I lean towards Golden, but like I said, if you stay at 8, and I do think this, I think the Panthers are very, very. There's a very good chance they're going to trade down. I think unless there's a Mason Graham there or unless a Tyler Warren there, I don't think they would pick Ted McMillan at number 8. I think they would try to trade down 4 or 5 spots and pick up a earlier second round pick than they have right now, which is the Rams pick that we got. And if they did that, then possibly they could get somebody, earlier in the second round. That's one of those 6 or 7 receivers, or even the second or third best tight end at that point. But what are your thoughts on the wide receivers? Are you a big McMillan guy, or am I sniffing down the right path of gold?
I'm very much in agreement with you. I got Golden as the better overall prospect. I think Golden, when you combine production and the metrics, just really just like over the last 3 months has gone all the way up to wide receiver 1, and I'm buying that hype. I also like Luther Burden out of Mizzou. I know he had a quieter year this past year than 2 years ago, but the skill set's all there, and he could be one of those major regrets that teams have. I'm going to talk about the tight. I also like Kyle Williams, like guys like in the third round too. Mm-hmm. I'm not as high on McMillan as others. He reminds me a little bit more of like a Vincent Jackson, maybe like as his upside, as opposed to like maybe a Mike Evans type. So if I'm the Panthers and I'm taking a receiver, I agree with you. I don't take any of them at 8 overall. I don't. I move it back to, I don't know, mid 15, 16, whatever, and grab him there. So definitely.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that there's going to be a wide receiver run that starts when Seattle picks. I think they're at 18, if I'm not mistaken, but somewhere around there. They feel that within the next 10 picks, there could be 3, 4, 5 receivers that go off the board. So, I don't think the Panthers are going to be in a spot to get one of those guys if they wait. But then again, I'm fine with them not taking a receiver in round 1 as well. I mean, Dan Morgan says he's pretty comfortable with the receiver room they have now.
Look, so I totally feel that. I'm looking at my 3 rounds of mock drafts. So you guys pick 57th, right, in the second round?
Yep.
So, to me, like I like the value in the pass catchers there. Maybe like I said, Kyle Williams, or the kids from Stanford, Ayoman, or in that area. So to me, like I'm not reaching on a T-Mac. Like I know you guys need a wide receiver 1, but that I like other guys down the board. I really do, and I think they're getting a little bit slept on there in the second and third round.
Yeah,
Brett. Let's talk about the quarterback position. Just in general. I mean, I don't think the Panthers are going to be looking after the way Bryce came around. Not even maybe for depth, and they've signed the
Andy Dalton back
as well. So they got pretty good depth in their room. But, when you start looking at a guy like Shedeur Sanders, and you see what's happening in Cleveland, and you see that Deshaun Watson, is a guy that, has done some questionable things character-wise, and there's a lot of, I guess, disdain for, what's going on in that city right now. Are you going to take a quarterback early, maybe as the second pick, or, because I think the problem maybe with Shedeur is not necessarily the skill set per se, but it's maybe more of the other things that exist. And I'm not going to say he's a bad leader because I've never been in the same room with him, but kind of the ego and the arrogance that go along with him at that position doesn't lead well for teams, especially a team that's struggling for leadership.
You're right. It's in a tough evaluation when you don't know the guy like you just described. And I would say I'm of the opinion that there's the Giants at picking at 3 are in love with him. And I know people may not buy that, and I could be way off here. And that's why I think that there's a lot of Jackson Dart smoke going on right now. I think that that's the Giants trying to sort of, send to Cleveland a message like, we're taking Dart at 3, maybe just sends them like a little bit of like a jolt, like what should we do at 2? It may devalue like that pick in general if they were looking to trade even too. If the Giants are all in on Dart, then it becomes less coveted of a pick to trade up for. Mm-hmm. So my personal belief is, whatever Sanders becomes, he becomes. But I do think that the Giants really like him, and I don't think he gets past the 3rd pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're trying to create as many smoke screens as they can, but everything seems to point to that if he's there at number 3, they take him. Now, if he's not there, if Cleveland does take him, and obviously Cam Ward's going to go off the board at 1, it looks like, to Tennessee. If he's not there, then that really does change the draft, because now the Giants have to decide, do they take Travis Hunter? Abdul Carter will be sitting right there, and do you take him, who everyone thinks is obviously the number one defensive end in the draft? So that's where the draft could take its first turn if the Giants don't take Shedeur. Do you think the Jets would let Shedeur get by too?
It's an excellent question. It's something that I've talked about a lot, and I don't know how they could. I mean, like they certainly need a franchise QB on their roster, and they don't have one right now. So it makes a ton of sense. I don't know if this new GM and new coach with Aaron Glenn, I don't know if they're looking to make their big push there and make their big pick at 7 in their first year of the regime. I don't think they are. So I don't think they even want to have that decision on their hands, if I were to really give you a full understanding of that. But I just think Sanders will be picked by Cleveland. I think it's simpler than most, but that could be if he doesn't, I don't think he gets past the Giants.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Talk about a guy like Travis Hunter, Shedeur's, a teammate, and when you turn on the film, you see all the intangibles that you're looking for, right? You see, the great awareness, the great ball skills, has a great coach, the upbringing, all the things that go along with when you watch the game and you watch them play. But the measurables were a little bit disappointing. He didn't have the top end speed that maybe you expected. And what is your thoughts with a guy like Hunter, who a lot of people thought might be the best athlete coming out of this draft?
It's a great one. I mean, a very polarizing subject. I think that a team decides on positionally offense or defense, and he's not going to play both sides of the ball. That's just my opinion of it. I think that the best way to deploy Hunter would be receiver. I get it. I get it that he's a good cornerback, and he could, he's got the ball skills and obviously the speed and all the traits to keep up with these elite receivers. But, we're talking about an offensive league here, and a weapon like him, he kind of sort of reminds you a little bit of OBJ, in terms of like the ball skills, in terms of recognition and high pointing and the speed. But I think he's going to be an incredible wide receiver, and I don't know which. Obviously, we don't know which team gets him yet, but that's when the draft really gets going. That's that 2-3 pick. That's when the juice is going, and then there's a little bit of a lull in the action, almost kind of when when the Jets go and the Panthers go. It's not as high. It's going to be interesting. Those few top picks will obviously decide how the Jets and the Panthers go.
Yeah, let's dive into. I want to dive into defensive line as well as corners, but let's start with defensive line because if the Panthers stay true to what a lot of people think before free agency in particular, now that they have filled a lot of those holes, they don't have the pressure, I think, to feel like they've got to take a defensive player. But let's assume they do, and let's assume that they're looking at the defensive line, and let's assume that Mason Graham is not there, which probably won't be. Out of the defensive ends that the two guys from Georgia, there's about 5 guys there that they really have to. The 2 guys from Texas A&M. Yep. How do you look at or rank those guys?
And before you finish, let me piggyback off of something real quick because I want you to add to this as well because it was a question I was going to have, so we can just combine it into one. Sure. When you look at these guys and talent-wise, obviously the talent's going to be there for any one of these guys in the top 10, top 15 picks. How much does fit come into scheme with your talent? Because you look at these smaller defensive ends, if I play a 4-3 defense and I need an end that's going to stand up against the rush, he doesn't really fit what I'm going to do as an every down player. He's going to be more of a specialist coming off the bench, a guy that can, but if I'm playing a 3-4 or some sort of odd defense where I'm dropping or rushing, now that might be a better pick for you as an organization. So factor that into your response when you're talking about these defensive ends for the Panthers.
No, and I think it's a really good point. And I think that a lot of that traces back to having the same GM and same coach. That's really how the good teams operate. Like you look at a team with a lot of turnover, at the HC or the GM position, you're not going to build out that, system that you just described where you're drafting based on your philosophy and your scheme. So
identity.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the Jets. Like Aaron Glenn is only talking about that word, identity, and building an identity. So they're going to be drafting guys that are, I guess, junkyard dogs and football lifers who are just studying tape, hopefully, all day. So I think that scheme and that plays a massive part. A little bit maybe more on certain positions than others. Some guys are just, this guy's a dude and we just need him.
Yeah.
And then, in terms of DJ, your initial question of which guys Panthers could target there. it's interesting to me. Like, it almost seems like they're, if they do take a defensive like rusher, like an edge rusher there, it's a little bit of a reach. Like, it's just a slight reach because like it looks like, as you described, like a Mikael Williams or like a Mike Green or like a Jihad Campbell or Shamar Stewart. To me, all those guys could be good and will be solid, but they're all in like that mid first round bracket. So not to say if you could nail that pick at 8, who cares? Like
right.
He's a few picks early. I would say is a big name to watch out for the next month, or even a little less than a month now, is Mike Green, because it's a polarizing situation of a guy that could be an absolute game wrecker, to a point where he's got serious stuff to answer to, and no one's doubting the seriousness of that. So I think on my first time I came on with you guys, the first pick that I still am sticking with you guys, I know it's just jumping to the cornerbacks, it's Jade. I just keep mocking Jade to the Panthers. It's just something that just fits like a glove for me every time I do it. But you guys can tell me if I'm mistaken there.
No, I mean, listen, the Panthers obviously signed J.C. Horn to a new big deal at their quarterback one position. They brought Michael Jackson back, who was their starter across from him last year. They brought him back on a new free agent deal. So they've got their 2 starters in place. The rookie Wade that they got in the 5th round last year from Washington State worked his way into starting at slot and played well until he got hurt towards the end of this year. But corner is definitely a place where they need some depth for sure. So I don't think it would surprise anybody if they did take a corner at 8. But again, I think that also lends itself to trading back a little bit. Like, I think they're in a perfect position to trade back. Now, look, Green, you're right. I mean, Green, to me, when you watch tape and his workout at Marshall, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it was ridiculous that this big dude's moving like that. And all the measurables are there, but he has the 2 issues that have happened in high school and whatever. Now, I also heard a couple GMs anonymously say that they're fine with that now, that the kid has come out. He addressed them in his press conference. He took every question in private meetings. They've had, every NFL team has their own,
all the background
checkers. So
right.
I have heard that a lot of teams now are okay with what they've learned, and that what he was saying was the truth, and whatever, that'll remain to be seen. He's the one that I think if the Panthers took it 8, would probably be a surprise, but it would be one of the surprises that you go, oh man, let's just hope he stays out of trouble, because he could be a dog.
Upside risk reward.
Yeah,
and you know what? It's a very interesting point. I want to ask you guys a question, because I think about I'm a Jets fan, and we if the Jets were to say draft a guy like Mike Green, the New York media is just going to destroy this guy. My question to you is, Carolina is a much chiller place, and I'd rather live and play there. I love the Carolinas, but if you guys drafted a guy like Mike Green, like, you could get away with it, and it could be a little bit less of a bigger deal. Am I right about that?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things in years past as well, that players are very lucky to come here, because having been on the radio and things of that nature, where you see the media. We don't really attack those guys as much as they would in other big cities, Philadelphia, New York. Some of the tradition and history that goes in there, the passion that there's this is a very melting pot city. So there's going to be a lot of Jets fans up here. There's going to be a lot of New York fans, and they're going to pick the Panthers, but they're going to root for their Jets, right? They're going to kind of fall into that. So because of that, I think that you have a much bigger buffer if you take a guy as a risk guy, upside guy, versus you take a guy that everybody in the city loves.
Well, and I'll say this to that. Now, I think the fact that we have new ownership over the past, however, 5, 6, 7 years. Dan Morgan's new regime with the general manager. This is the first offseason that we have had that continuity that you talked about, where we kept our defensive coordinator, our offensive coordinator, and all those things. Under the old regime, I don't think the Panthers probably would have taken a chance, because you got to remember some of the horror stories that we've had here with Ray Caruth, and then Fred Lane getting shot by his wife, and there's several others we can go on and on about. So I don't know if they would have risked it back then. But I think under this new regime where,
how much do they trust Dan Morgan is really what
that's what I'm saying. I think they trust that Dan is going to do his homework. They, some of the words that Aaron Glenn uses there in New York are the same words that Canales and Morgan are using here, where they want dogs, they want football guys. That's another reason why I think Ted McMillan won't be their pick, was because just this week he came out and said he don't like watching film. He don't watch film. And so, like, first of all, his agent probably had a heart attack when he said that, kind of like the Snow White actress that whatever she did to ruin that movie I keep reading about. But he probably had a heart attack when his client said, I don't like watching film. That by itself, to me, would make the Panthers go, no way. Because they want dogs. They want guys that want to watch film, that you got to kick them out of the film room.
I got to be honest. Who would want that? I mean, the skills are obviously good. Like, he's obviously got the talent and the athleticism to be a player, but I obviously think that drives serious red flags. I don't know the context of that video. I did see it. I don't know if it was taken a year ago or taken last week. So I want to dig into that. But I mean, for him to say it, he sounded pretty serious, and like he just doesn't seem like he's a gamer. And the problem is like there's too many of those people who are so hungry. Like the guys that will do anything for a job, and like their families are just saying, keep working. Like, you're there, they're supporting them. And there's so many guys that would die for a chance. So when you see a guy like Ted McMillan, who's like almost taking his opportunity for granted, to me, it's concerning. And, I already had him ranked, as my fourth receiver. And I'm just not going to really budge off that right now.
Well, I'll say this, Brad, as a guy that has been in those locker rooms as a veteran player, I want guys that are serious about winning, because they're costing me bread.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Frank, I was literally going to say that to you. I was like, how would you go about a player like that?
I mean, and I've played with guys like that, and they don't last very long. On top, they might last because of their skill set in the league, but they're never really going to have the impact, and they're always going to be viewed as an underachiever holding us back. So I hope that kid is taken a little bit out of context with what maybe he was asked with that question, because I know a lot of times that can be the place. Or I hope that he goes to a team for his sake, that he gets a veteran player that grabs him by the neck and pulls him in here and said, listen, either you're going to do this our way, and this is the way we do it here, or you're not going to be here, and you're not going to have many friends, and we're going to be asking if you're asked to leave.
Yeah,
that's what I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking with Brett Hoffman from Sleeper NFL and Gator Wagers. And back to that team culture that we talked about, that Dan Morgan and Dave Canales have preached that they want. When you do take a guy that you feel maybe a little bit of a risk, you see teams that have great cultures are the ones that always take risks. You see the Patriots would take guys like that. Kansas City's it's bit them in the butt a couple of times, but teams that have great cultures, great head coaches, great GMs that are all on the same page seem to be the ones that are a little more comfortable taking those risks, and they normally pan out. So if Dan and Dave are on line with where they want to be, and they sound like they are, and even listen to the players, I forget, what was it, like a month ago, they do an anonymous survey about, what do you think about coaches and players and ownership? Well, our ownership gets like a D+ every year. Well, this year, Canales, I believe, got like an A. And
let me say this here. Let me say this to your point right there. And again, I've been on both sides of this. I've been on teams with great leaders, and I've been on teams with just guys that are trying to survive and keep a job, right? Because they don't have the identity that we're talking about. When I was with the Rams, every position group had a Hall of Fame leader that worked the hardest, and they grabbed those guys. And I'm going to use Adam Archuleta as a guy that came in, but we didn't need to. He was a guy that already bought into, I got to work harder than everybody else. But I've also seen other guys that have a lot of talent and have a lot of potential. If you have a veteran-led team with a veteran coach and established, GM that have identified their culture, and they have an identity, that kid has nowhere to turn other than to buy in.
Yeah.
If you go to a place that's unestablished, that's fighting, and that's what's usually happening with these first, 5, 6, picks, 7 picks, 8 picks. They don't do a very good job with their leadership. They don't do a very good job with their culture. And that's the reason why they're picking 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah, every year there's somewhere in there. You're right. Let's get into tight ends just for a minute, because I know we talked about Warren, and you're probably right. He probably won't be there when the Panthers pick, and even if he is, who knows if they take him or not. The Panthers have done a great job this year in particular of keeping everything close to the vest. I mean, there's been no leaks, and I mean, they really have, which has been great. But give us some of the other tight ends that might be available, with that second pick late in the second round or the third round or fourth round that you think would be, a good value there that could be a player.
No question. So I do think that just there, in terms of like the tiers, it's Tyler Warren, and then there's the drop off. So I will say that there is a big drop off in my opinion from 1 to 2, but two other guys that there's a few. I'm a little bit like, I'll start with a guy who I'm a little lower on than others is Colston Loveland. I think he's projected, the Michigan tight end. I think he's projected to go late first. There's been other tight ends that have simply just, to me, over the last month passed him by. Like Mason Taylor, the LSU kid, testing.
Mm-hmm. His tests are great.
Tests are great. He has the pedigree. His dad's Jason Taylor. His uncle is Zach Thomas.
Yeah.
So this kid's a lifer. And he's obviously LSU pedigree. He's got the skill set. I also like Terrence Ferguson, the Oregon tight end, a lot. Think he's projected to go anywhere maybe mid-second to third. So in that flex area. And then the last three other guys I'll just quickly name: Gunnar Helm, Texas, maybe a fourth rounder. Watch out for Harold Fannin. People really like, possible third rounder. And then the last guy, Elijah Arroyo, Miami, flashed a lot of potential with Cam Ward. So people are kind of high on him too.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here talking about identity and legacy and trust and all the things with management, and Dan Morgan's name has come up quite a bit. When you start looking at what he's done here, not necessarily in free agency, because I think a lot of people would agree he's hit home runs with the offensive line, putting guys in position. You see visibly the impact that those guys had first year because they're veteran players. So you're going to see it a lot more faster. It's a little bit more difficult to see that with the draft. Xavier Legette, Jonathan Brooks, Trevin Wallace, Jatavian Sanders, Shaw Smith-Wade. All these guys are going to be maybe 2 or 3 year projects, especially the lower you get down, but none of them really had the impact that they really probably should have had with where they were picked, and especially, Xavier Legette as a first round guy. So how big is this year's draft so us as fans can gain a little bit more confidence with Dan Morgan in the draft?
Yeah, no. So Frank, I totally understand your point. What's your question there? My apologies.
Yeah. So my question is that what is it going to take for Dan Morgan to do in order for us to get, because we don't know the full impact of these guys yet, or maybe I'm totally off base. Do you think that these guys have a legitimate shot of being playmakers and players in this league?
Yeah. So I 100%. So I actually like Xavier Legette. I think that there's that. He's a rookie. Like, some guys just don't always get it right away. And I'm sure you know that better than me, Frank. So there's going to be a lag period for some guys, but Legette's a second-year guy that I actually really would look out for to break out a little bit. So I like some of those names that you just dropped on me. I'm not sure exactly the production. I don't have in front of me of Jatavian Sanders and the other two, but those guys are guys I liked at the draft as well. So I think Dan Morgan is profiling the right type of guy. And I like the way they're identifying their draft classes. So I'm actually very bullish on where the Panthers are kind of headed directionally. I know it doesn't they hadn't have a grand slam off season, but you guys filled basically the main holes. And like we talked about earlier, put yourself in position to take your the best player available on Dan Morgan's board, etc. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I would say the second year guys, it's a massive year for them. Xavier Legette being one of probably the key one. What round was he taking? Second round?
We traded out from the second into the end of the first to get him. So
32 overall.
So we get the extra the fourth year guaranteed. So they traded up.
Interesting. Yeah, you don't see that trade a lot for a receiver at 32, but I is what it is. And no, I think you're gonna add to it this in this draft. So you're gonna be adding a weapon or two, no question.
Yeah, and Legette, when he had a solid year. Towards the end, when he hurt his wrist, I guess the back end of the year, he had some drops that he had not been having. In the red zone, he was tough. I mean, he was really a tough matchup for the teams in the red zone. And again, talking to players on the team, coaches on the team, he's one of those guys that they all say is in the film room. He's trying to get better. I know just the other day, I saw a video of him and Adam Thielen out working right now, working out, catching balls. Adam Thielen loves the kid. And so he seems to be the kind of, cut from the cloth they want. But again, also the first half of the season last year, our quarterback, we had Bryce was awful. And then Andy Dalton came in, had like one good game, and then he was awful. And then Bryce came back and obviously finished the year great. But a lot of people say when Leggett hurt his wrist is when a lot of the drops start happening. So we'll see. But Frank's right. I mean, he's got to turn out to be a player. Sanders had a really good rookie year. He had a concussion against Kansas City after having a couple big games and wasn't quite the same after that. And then Wallace, the rookie, out of Kentucky, the linebacker last year, I thought he had a really good year. He was thrown into starting after the second or third game when Shaq Thompson was out. And I thought he had a really good rookie
Unfortunately,
campaign.
I don't think you could say that about any defensive player on that field last year.
Well, there wasn't
They had
many.
a really good year.
Yeah, J.C. Horn might be the only one, I guess, that would qualify that high. But on the worst NFL or worst defense in history of the NFL.
It's one thing to be having a great year. It's another thing to be the tallest midget. So.
But was it historically like the worst defense you guys had?
It was, but we're not talking about that anymore.
What are
Brett,
we comparing?
We're moving on from that, and we're hoping that Dan, last year, like Frank said, the offensive line was the worst in the NFL, and Dan fixed it through free agency, and it allowed him to not have to feel pressure to take an offensive lineman early if he didn't want to. This year, he's done the same thing on defense. He's filled a lot of the holes on defense. Not that there's more holes that need to be filled, but he at least put him in a position to where he does not have to go defense. The only position that honestly that would surprise me if they took in the first round would be running back.
Yep.
And that would be it. Like I don't see there's any way, no way they would take a running back at 8, or even if they trade back. That's the only position. Safety wouldn't surprise me. Corner, defensive line, receiver, tight end. Even if one of the left tackles fall and they trade down, I could see that happening. The only one, if you ask me, I had to bet my house on, I would say there's no way they take a running back. No way.
I was like looking at the odds for like what teams are going to draft what position. I wanted to pull up the Panthers, but as I do that, I you're right, and I also do like Jonathan Brooks too. Talking about the running backs. He'll
miss the whole year probably, but you're right. I think the one game he did play before ripping his knee again, he had a couple plays that you just go, man, we don't have anybody that can do that. But he is going to miss the whole year again, unfortunately.
That's very unfortunate. No, I'm just quickly looking at the odds. It's just curious what they say in terms of like what position you guys will probably draft. This is on like BetMGM.
Yeah. I would have to think it would be defensive line.
So
I was somewhere on the defensive side too. I would maybe even safety, the kid from South Carolina that we
or Malachi Starks from Georgia, who I love. I think he's the safest pick if we were to take a defensive player at 8. I think he's the safest, can't miss, Pro Bowl every year guy. But while you're looking at that, let me ask you this. So Genty has been a guy that you see all over draft boards. I mean, awesome running back from Boise State, just had great workouts last week. Dude is chiseled. He can run. I mean, he's pretty much, can't miss guy. And, it will be interesting to see that if Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are the first 2 picks in the draft, the Giants are sitting there with Abdul Carter or Genty sitting there. The Giants obviously need a running back. I mean, the rookie Tracy had a solid year last year, but he's not the the long-term answer. Where do you think the latest Genty, like maybe 7? Well, not 7. Jets are going to take him. So 5 or 6 Raiders maybe at 5.
I'll say a little later. Let me just say this. I agree with you. The Giants could use it, but the Giants did have the whole Barkley 4th or whatever they took 2nd overall and didn't really pan out. And I just don't know if that's the direction they would go. When I look at the draft yes, when you get to the 7th pick, the Jets are there. It would be tough for me to see the Jets passing up on a blue chip talent. They can use just blue chip talent, period. Doesn't matter the position. So that's where maybe, I would be surprised. But I'd say like in terms of like the highest he could possibly go, probably Dallas at 12.
And I know when you said that Barkley didn't pan out, I know you were meaning for the Giants, not in general. Barkley's the best running back in the game.
They nailed the pick.
Yeah. And I know you know that, but the problem with the Giants, and I think that a lot of people are seeing right now in the comparisons, is that when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, Eli Manning, you win Super Bowls, and you have some really good defensive players, and you surround them with that. A lot of people feel like the Steelers right now are kind of going through that identity change of losing a quarterback with Roethlisberger, and what's their next step? You try to fill it with a stopgap Wilson and maybe some other guys that come in, and they're no longer there. You sit here having a next Hall of Fame quarterback with Aaron Rodgers on the market, but you also have the potential, because they don't have a quarterback, and after bringing a DJ Metcalf in, what do you do if you're the Steelers?
Yeah, it's one of the funnest questions of the draft to me. So it's definitely right now. I have them penciled in at Jackson Dart. That's where I have Jackson Dart going. So I think that the Steelers fans whenever I post a mock draft with Jackson Dart, they all panic and they all tell me this is Kenny Pickett all over again. So
yeah.
There's internally, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of juice, and I get it. Like, it's a little bit of a, taking like an Ole Miss spread out offense quarterback and taking it to a cold weather Pittsburgh. I don't know. So I'm not really all that sold on that fit per se. So to answer your question, it looks like, they're still actively dying for Rodgers to sign with them. I mean, it seems like it's up to Aaron at this point. He's either, I think what he said is he's just deciding do I want to do this, or do I want to potentially wait and see if there's a QB who goes down in the first couple of weeks. So I think that's the most polarizing offseason topic right now. And still don't know if Rodgers takes that job. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting conundrum that the Steelers are in, but also Rodgers feels like he has all the cards right now.
Yeah.
He's not desperate to make money. Somebody is desperate to have him as their quarterback, and a fan base that is used to winning has a lot of pieces. They go out and sign a $120 million guy in their receiver. You better have somebody throwing him the ball, whether that's a rookie. And I'm sorry, Mason Rudolph is not going to be that guy, long term. So do you go get your long term guy, or here's another potential, option, Jalen Milroe. Sitting right there. You talked about the cold weather, and I agree with you completely. You look at certain cities and certain demographics, they play outside, cold weather. The reason why they don't have success with these wide open offenses is because weather dictates a lot of those things. Wind, cold, hard to catch, hard to run routes, running the ball, stopping the run, but having a quarterback, as we've seen the trend, and we all understand it's a copycat league, having a quarterback like Jalen Milroe could make a difference in a cold weather city with a lot of wind, with players surrounding him.
I mean, 1,000,000%. I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why the Jets just signed Fields. I think that he fits the smash mouth, cold weather brand of football that the Jets should be playing. I go to the Jets games. It's freezing half the year.
That's right.
So, we're not going to be this, the greatest show on turf throwing the football around like they thought they were last year. Obviously, it's not. It doesn't even feel right. It looks wrong. Like, you could just see it. It's just like we shouldn't be playing this type of way. So I think you're totally right. I think the Jets embrace that and are going to play to that. And I think that it's a big thing when you make a draft choice. Like, a guy just played in Miami for 4 years in short sleeves all day. Is he going to kill it with, a cold weather Pittsburgh? I don't know. There's a lot of deep digging you got to do there. And to your Milroe point, I think that second round, like in that 40 range, like I look for the Saints is my number one list for guys maybe to develop for a year. So I have him right now at 42 or 40, whatever the Saints pick in the second round. And just want to make a last point on Rodgers. Isn't it just funny how all these proud franchises fighting for the scraps of the New York Jets?
Yeah, good Lord. I'm a Giants fan too. And man, it's when I don't even want to talk about it. We have had a quarterback in a long time, and Daniel Jones and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and that's, and I guess Shador Sanders, if he's there, will be there. Aaron Rodgers, my opinion on that is, and I don't dislike Aaron Rodgers. I really don't. My gut tells me that his ego and his competitiveness is not going to let him sit out. Like, I think he's going to play, and I think it is going to be.
He still has some. I mean, he had one of his better years last year.
No, I mean, listen, he was hurt most of the year, so I agree with you. But as far as Milroe goes with Steelers, he has to go somewhere where he can sit for a year. There's no question. I mean, listen, if you want him, I mean, you could have kept Justin Fields, who right now at least is a better version of him. He can run and he throws better right now. Now we'll see what Milroe does down the road. I mean, I know his accuracy has been a problem, but his measurables are off the chart. I mean, good Lord, watching his workout was incredible. And so I think you're right. I think there are a lot of teams that are going to try to draft him in the second, third round and stash him away. And you know, hopefully it's not the Saints, because I don't want to have to face that guy twice a year with the Panthers. But my gut tells me that Rodgers is going to stay with Pittsburgh or sign with Pittsburgh and probably do it soon, because again, if you're the Steelers, you need to know before the draft, because you need to know, am I going to make it a higher priority to get a quarterback, you know, or if one of these quarterbacks do start sliding. I mean, you know, look, you mentioned Dart. There's mock drafts that have him going 9th to the Saints. So, you know, and then you've got guys that have him going, you know, early in the second round. So
and then you got guys telling you Sanders is a second round pick.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of different smoke screens being sent out there. Yeah, and
I'm
I know,
one of them.
Yeah, and Frank's
and by the way, there has to be one of every 3 guys is going to say it.
I think Sanders is going to be good, but again, if he does go to the Giants, it's good for him from the standpoint as he won't have to play this year.
Well, yeah.
If he goes to Cleveland.
Well, it just depends on what you value as a GM in an organization. Do I value character and leadership, or do I value athleticism and talent? Right. So if I think that a quarterback needs to be a certain quality and he doesn't meet those standards, I'm not going to take him.
Yeah.
If there's 1 out of 3, like you said, there's only so many spots taken. There's only so many quarterbacks needed. Eventually your stock is going to start to draft, and other guys is going to start to rise. So I know we're talking about all the sexy picks, and you guys love it all, the receivers,
here we go,
and the running backs, and all these foo-foo players. But when you look at the NFL today, and you look at the teams that had success, they did it on one side of the ball or on the other side of the ball, and it started in the trenches. Whether it's the Chiefs on the offense or the defensive side, the Eagles on the best offensive line, best defensive line. Hell, they're trying to outlaw, you know, the tush push, because it's just an unfair advantage for them, which we could sit here and talk about days for why it's not. But you look at the way that those teams are built up front: hogs, heavy, fast, athletic, big, physical, strong, you know, quarterback hunters, run stoppers, you know, pile movers and road graders. Who are those guys in the draft on the offensive side, the offensive line, that could come in and have a big impact for a team that's close?
Yeah, everyone's all in on Membo, and I'm going to join them. You know, he had a hell of a season. He just ran the 4.6 or 4.7. The guy's ridiculous. He's absolutely a top, 7, 8 pick right now based on every, chart that I'm looking at. So I think him and Will Campbell seem to be like the top 2 tackles in the draft. That's where, top 10 potential really lies. There's slowly a little bit of a drop off. Like Kelvin Banks, the Texas kid, originally was charted as a top, 20 pick, slowly moving back a little bit. Like you see Gray Zabel pop in as a potential, late first round type. Just like Tyler Booker, the Alabama guard, another really high, people love the kid. So, this is a meat and potatoes draft, as more so on the defensive side of the football, this is a defensive line, heavy draft. So, in the trenches, like you just described, is the identity of the championship teams. So building that out is critical. And, look at the best teams. They've been stacking the right picks at that position over the last 3 years. And you look at the bad teams, and they've been missing on those picks. They, didn't address it,
Giants,
the right guy. Giants are, a prime example. They missed on the Evan Neal and they killed him. So I shouldn't say this. This consensus in the draft when fans are looking at it or we're looking at it is offensive line safe. We just got our guy. You got to be real careful with that, because if you miss on that pick, not only did you not address critical needs on the other side of the ball or whatever, but you're just putting yourself in, Bryce Young to get his ass kicked.
Right, exactly. With young quarterbacks in particular, and that as a Panther fan, you're hoping that both those left tackles go in the top 7. Just to push some of those other guys back to you, and they could, like you said. I mean, both those guys. Again, you could look at mock drafts that have Jacksonville drafting one of them, the Patriots drafting one. So they both could go before the Panthers pick at 8. And like I said, as a Panther fan, you want that to happen because that just pushes some of the needs, defensive line guys. I mean, if Mason Graham's there, I don't see how the Panthers don't take him. I mean, I think he fits, even though, again, they signed some defensive linemen that are going to help a lot. But that kid, as far as defensive linemen go, in the middle next to Derek Brown, to me, it's going to be really hard to run against him. But I doubt he'll be there.
No. I mean, you're right. And it's important for Dan Morgan I'm sure he knows better than us or better than me, whatever, just because you address some of those players or positions in the offseason, if that guy slips or if he's your best available player, you're not in any position, in my opinion, Carolina, to say we need a corner or we need this.
Right.
It's not that time yet. We need blue chips. And it doesn't matter where – it matters what position, but let's not put it into so much perspective and let's just grab talent. So that's really where I fall with that.
Yep, I agree. Any other questions, Frank?
No, I think
we covered every base.
He's answered all my questions and made me feel good about the Panthers.
I'm a Panthers fan right now. I think.
All right, awesome. There we go.
I'm joining this Panthers wagon.
Welcome aboard, man. Welcome aboard. They, like I said, if the moves that Dan made this year pay off like the ones last year, especially through free agency, and if Bryce continues to improve like he did, then it should be at least a fun year, at least more fun than that we've had in a long time here as any sports fan, really, in Charlotte, except for Charlotte FC now, who's kicking some butt. But Brett, thank you for joining us. Tell everybody again where they can follow you on socials.
Absolutely, and thank you guys, DJ Frank. Appreciate it as always. You can mostly on X, Brett Hoffman Jr. Jr. I also have a YouTube show. I do a lot of NFL draft content. It's called Draft Nights.
Okay,
perfect. Hit me up.
Yeah, and we'll send us those. We'll link to it as well from our stuff. And we're 25 days from the draft, so we'll have you back on maybe the week before, and because I'm sure a lot of change will have changed by then. And
we may have a whole different discussion.
No doubt, man. You're probably right. But thank you for joining us, man. We'll talk to you here in a couple weeks.
See you, bud.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
All right,
Thanks, Brett.